Nyman para começar uma das duas palestras que a gente tem da Mozilla, uma atrás da outra, que vão ser de matar. Palmas para ele, por favor.
Boa tarde. Meu nome é Robert e eu amo JavaScript. Close enough? Great. That's as good as it's going to get. We can actually stop now and have more coffee. I'm really happy to be here. I missed out last year, so I'm happy actually doing it again, and I get the chance to come down here. And especially if you look at history and look at the first JavaScript conference, it basically had one speaker, Brendan Eich, and the topic is, what is JavaScript anyways? And then a quick lunch and a wrap up, and that was it. And now we have about 1,000 people here, so that's pretty good. It's also fun for me personally to have Douglas Crockford here, because he was in the audience when I gave my first big talk about JavaScript, explaining how JavaScript actually works, which is terrifying, of course, to have him there. But it worked out well overall. At least we still talk with each other. So I take this as a good sign. So I've come a long way to be here. A really long way. I live in Sweden. So basically, wherever I travel, it's going to be warmer, except for right now. So I don't really know what's up with your weather, but come on, you can do so much better. And I've been writing and blogging for a long time. So I've, since the beginning of 2000 something, I'm writing about web development and JavaScript and such. So it's really nice to see how strong JavaScript has gotten, also seeing the progress over time, and it's amazing all the things we can do right now. And naturally, I work for Mozilla, and I'm the editor of the Mozilla Hacks blog. We try to make the Hacks blog a good resource for whatever you need to build things for the open web. So it's not only about Mozilla stuff or Firefox stuff. It's overall, how can we help you do things better? I also tweet on a regular basis. It's actually it's almost interesting at times right now. So feel free to follow me if you're interested in HTML5 or the open web or Firefox OS. So usually when I go to a conference, the question is always, what is Mozilla actually? What do you do? Everyone knows about Firefox, but what do you actually do? So Mozilla is a non-profit, which basically means we're the good guys. You know that. But the general point, and you also people ask, so it's good that you're doing Firefox and all these other stuff, but how do you actually make money? And I guess half of the employees of Mozilla also ask that. And the way it's being done is that, our colleagues? So basically we have a number of different deals with partners. So if you use Firefox and use the search engine box, depending which search engine you use, we get money for that. We have people giving contributions who believe that the web needs to be open, that we're a good player to find balance out there. And the interesting thing with Mozilla is actually split in two different parts. One is the Mozilla Corporation, and one is the Mozilla Foundation. And the Mozilla Corporation is a proper registered company in the US. And the only reason for doing that is that in America, the only way you're allowed to do lobbying, you need to do it for profit. So, if you want to, affect the market, you need to have some monetary gain that you're aiming for. You can't just do something for good. So we had to have a corporation to be accepted by the US for doing that, which is kind of interesting. You do know that we make a web browser. We're the nice one. But seriously though, I think it's a really good climate. Like when we had Internet Explorer 6, and it was more or less the only browser in the world, 98, 99% of the market. Things have really changed, and lots of people walk up to me at conferences and they ask, oh, so Google Chrome is coming right now. That must be really bad. That sucks, right? It's like, no, on the contrary, because we're achieving what we wanted. We never wanted to have 100% market share with Firefox, and we don't think anyone should have that. The good thing now is that Google Chrome is really good. I think Firefox is really good. Opera is, well, they had a little incident. We'll not talk about them. But also if you look at Safari and Internet Explorer as well in its latest incarnations, all web browsers are getting good. And I truly believe that comes out of the competition, that we have so many good engineers challenging each other to make things better. Just look at JavaScript performance in the last few years. Like, things we run now wouldn't even be possible way back. We also work with making people aware of what kind of data they share online. So, of course we believe in the internet, of course we believe in information sharing, but we just want people to be aware of what they share and also to protect their data. Don't give all your information away to someone when you don't know what they're going to do with it. It's your data, it's your life. And we also work with trying to detect the trends, what's happening right now. And how can we build products to match that? And how can we make sure that we're actually on top of what's going on? And I think getting a bit more serious, I think where we are right now is parts of the world are really, really spoiled. We're basically buying things we don't need with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. And that's a bit messed up. And especially if you look in North America or Western Europe, people have way too much money and people are way too spoiled. And with New York Times, for instance, if you have a subscription for New York Times and their digital service, the average number of devices a subscriber has is 6. 6 devices to access your account. And that's, well, it's all good for them. But what about the rest of the world? What about the majority of the world? And I think that's one of the main things we're trying to work with. We don't believe it's the Western web. We want to make sure that the web is available to anyone. It doesn't matter about your income or possibilities. We want everyone to be able to take part of the web. Which leads me to Firefox OS. Firefox OS is generally built up of only web technologies. It's split in 3 small parts. So basically, we have a really small Linux kernel called Gonk, which is really, really bare bones just to expose the drivers and such. And then we put Gecko on top of that, and Gecko is the rendering engine in Firefox. So basically, when you start this phone, you start a web browser window. And then in Gecko, we put something called Gaia. And Gaia is the user interface of Firefox OS. And Gaia is only HTML5, CSS, JavaScript. That's it. Which means that the native apps are HTML5 apps. Everything that you see and interact with on the phone is HTML5. Which is also, if nothing else, it's a good exercise for us, because if our apps doesn't work, your apps won't work either. Like, everything is just the web. We're working under just the same circumstances. If you compare, for instance, with the iPhone, and you have a Safari browser on iPhone, and JavaScript performance and all that, it's really good. But then if you have a web view in your own app, you're not going to get the same performance and the same JavaScript runtime. And I don't think that's okay, right? You want to be able to build things under the same conditions. And one good thing, of course, as well with Firefox OS is that when we started building it, one of the main motivations have been, how can we offer a smartphone experience to people all around the world? How can we make sure that the cost is going to be so low, so, well, more or less, anyone can afford a phone? And so the main target, and I really want to stress this, we're not really competing with iPhones. We're not really competing with Nexus 4 or something like that. We're competing with old feature phones. People having old Nokia phones where one button is bigger than the whole display. That kind of crap. And how can we offer a smartphone experience to them for the same price? How can we make sure they can actually not only consume the web, but also give things to the web? So initially, when we started building the phone and looking at partnerships and all that, we made sure that we could start launching it in emerging markets. And we cooperated, for instance, with Telefonica. So this summer, we first launched in Spain, and we launched in Poland, and we've also launched in Colombia and Venezuela. And Brazil is on its way. I'm not going to say any dates because I'm going to lie, probably. But it will be here very soon in Brazil as well. And looking at the prices, and for instance in Spain, 69 euro, which is more or less not a lot, is what you can pay for get a full-featured smartphone. And that's pretty impressive. And especially if you start looking at other parts of the world, some parts in South America. If you look in Africa, for instance, there are more people with mobile phones than access to electricity. So in the villages, they have poles like this. They go and they charge their phone, and then they take off again. I don't know what they do in between, but I know about the charging part. And looking forward as well, we have a partnership with Foxconn. So Foxconn are hiring tons of people, tons of engineers, to start building for 7 different kinds of devices. So we're not only talking about, basically more or less cheap mobile phones now. We're talking about tablets. We're talking about all different kinds of range of phones. It could be more expensive phones with higher performance. We're also talking about TVs. And if everyone or anyone has ever worked with building things for the different operating systems that you have available on TVs, you know it's not a pleasant experience. So what about you could build something for the desktop web, and it's still going to work on a mobile web and on a TV as well? That's excellent, right? So we're not really at the state of write once, run everywhere. I'm never going to claim that, but it's getting closer and closer to using one open technology to deliver to as many platforms as possible. And for me personally, it's been fun as well, because I was along from day one with Firefox OS. And the thing with working for Mozilla is that everything we do is being done in the open, because any other major corporation, they would have these information meetings and something like that. The way I found out about Firefox OS is that someone someday published a wiki page publicly. And it said B2G, which was Bluetooth Gecko, the old code name for it. It's like, yeah, we're going to build a mobile operating system, just so you know. Then, of course, press and everyone knew before we knew, so we were just trying to figure out what the hell was going on. But that's also the good part, to be able to do anything in the open. And you get lots of feedback for that. But you also have lots of really, really good discussions, so you can make things better instead of just doing things hidden for a long, long time. So, and looking at these phones, and I also want to emphasize, especially when you start talking like this, my interest in this is the mobile web. On the desktop web, the web is more or less the platform that everyone's using. Everyone's using web browsers to access information. If you look at mobile devices, if you look at iPhones, Android, etc., everyone are using native apps. It could be apps written with Objective-C or Java or something like that. And I see that as a problem, because all those players, for business reasons, they're interested in owning the developer. If they have control over a developer, they make all the money and everyone's buying their devices and all that. All good and well. And I think it's really, really important, and hence the reason also for launching Firefox OS. How can we make sure that the web becomes as strong on mobile devices as it is on desktop devices? How can we make sure that we actually have a proper offering where we can actually compete with the devices we have out there as well? So one thing looking at that has been apps, because whether you like it or not, everyone wants an app right now. And so we're trying to find some interesting middle ground here. We're trying to find some interesting middle ground here where we can make sure that people can use what you're already building. Like, I'm not going to ask you to start learning another language to build for another mobile platform. And personally, I would never say just build it for Firefox OS, because then we're doing the same thing as everyone else is. Like, build for our platform is better. And that's not the point. The point is more to use what you're already building. If you're building mobile HTML5 websites right now, responsive design and all that, you can utilize it on Firefox OS as well. Like, Firefox OS is a platform that's already in place for you. So if you have a mobile website that works in a mobile web browser, it's going to work on Firefox OS as well. You don't have to do anything. And I think that's a really important point, that instead of learning something from scratch, just ship it to yet another platform. And one way of packaging it, which is completely optional, is that you can work with open web apps. And the idea with open web apps is that you have all your HTML5 apps, and you can just wrap them up as an app and install them on the phone if you want to. And usually when you talk to people, that sounds a bit terrifying, right? I need to have a football joke when in Brazil. It's mandatory. And the way we do that is basically you have whatever existing HTML5 app you already built, and then you add the manifest file on top of that. And a manifest file is a JSON file. Thank you, Douglas. And the only thing you have in the JSON file is basically describing your app. You have a version number, you have the number of your app, describing what the app does, etc. And then you have a few different icons for different resolutions and such. Developer information, localization and such. But this is pretty much it. Like if you have an existing mobile HTML5 website right now, add this and you're good to go. This is a Firefox OS app. And the point is not to sort of ruin Angelina's talk after, who has an hour about building apps, but this is it, right? You don't need to do anything more. Then if you want to, you can add more things on top. You can, like with any platform, you can make it richer on that platform, but you don't have to. We're not going to tell you the exact guidelines. If you don't do the gradient just as I want to, you can't, whatever, be installed on this platform. And of course, you can build excellent interfaces as well. I usually have it just because it's the most confusing dialogue I've ever seen. I think the trick question is also, what happens if you click the X? I don't know. I don't dare to. But the idea is, when you build stuff for this platform, you have two different options. You have packaged apps and hosted apps. And hosted apps basically means that you have all the control. You can install apps from your own website. We have a marketplace that's being offered, but you don't have to use that if you don't want to. That's more about findability and making money and such. But if you want to install the app from your own website, do that. Or if you have the app in the marketplace and you have it as a hosted app, that means that all the content in the app is still being served from your server. So you can update it or whatever when you want to and when you need to. That's not up to us. That's up to you, because we believe that you should be in control. That's not our job. And the thing with packaged apps is what you can do if you want to install the app directly on the device is you just zip up all the files that you have in your app and you install them as an app, and you're good to go. So it's really easy. And of course, with hosted apps, you have all the possibilities with HTML5 as well. If you want to do offline, you can use app cache and such. And also, and this is kind of a personal reflection, was it 97 when the first iPhone came out and sort of made a revolution with everything what we've known so far? I think what they said back then was basically that, oh, no, you don't need any core code to access things on the device. Just use web technologies. That's all you need. And that was all good and well, and 1 year went by, and then Objective-C and the App Store and everything came. And I think, in my opinion, where they went wrong is, of course, people didn't want to use web technologies on the iPhone because they couldn't access anything on the device. Like, if you can only show documents, it's not that interesting. But what if you can access contacts? What if you can access the phone, the gallery, etc.? Then it becomes more interesting. And I really wish they would have gone down this path a long, long time ago, with exposing more and more APIs from the platform to the web layer. So rather, how can you make the web layer more powerful instead of just throwing it out? So the idea with web APIs, and I think the latest count is up to 28 or something, is basically giving you all these APIs that will make things richer. And it's not only for Firefox OS. A number of these APIs also work in Firefox on Android. And I really want to stress that with all APIs that we're trying to get them standardized, and a number of them are already standardized by W3C, because if we were to build APIs that only work with our platform, that's also pointless. We're not doing something better for the web. We want to invent APIs that you're going to gain from on any platform. So a number of these APIs are in Firefox on Android, but they're also in Chrome. So it's getting better and better. And the point is, of course, that you can write your code once, it's going to work the same across all platforms. And when you build an app, you have a number of different security levels. And that's always a common question that comes up. And security-wise, and the left-hand column is an interesting one here, is that you have regular web content. So when you run Firefox in Firefox OS, it's just web content that's being rendered, and you have a certain security for that. You can have an installed web app, which means a hosted app, and since you still have all the code on your server, you don't really get more security access because you could update it to whatever and do really bad things. Then with packaged web apps, when you zip up all the files and install it on the device, it becomes a privileged web app. So you can specify within your app that you want to access more APIs and do more things. Then on the right-hand side, we have certified web apps, and those are basically reserved for us and the operator partners we work with. And we try more and more to make them available to you, but you have really big security concerns around that. But that could be like placing a call through an API. And we want to make sure that, of course, no one can hack your phone and call wherever. So we have a wiki page in the Mozilla website as well, which is outlining all the different APIs. And you don't need to read through it here, but I think what's interesting here is basically the name of the API and what it's supposed to be doing. But the part that I care about is the one in the right-hand column. So you can see if it's being standardized or not, and the current state of that. And the three columns here, basically D, A, and B. D means, is it available in Firefox on desktop? A means, is it available in Firefox on Android? And B, from the old boot gecko name, is it available in Firefox OS? But it also gives you an indication with some APIs, they're interesting all across the board. Like for instance, at the bottom you have your location and other things, but you can see if it's green, that means that we implemented it in every incarnation of Firefox, no matter the platform. And then you can see, for instance, with the gray, that some APIs are only interesting on some platforms. Like the mouse lock API is not that interesting on a phone, for instance. But also gives you a good hint where it's going to work. And then you have different coloring. For instance, the blue here means that it's certified, so you can't access that right now. And I was talking about the manifest file before, where you described your app and all that. And if you want to access some other APIs where you need more security clearance, you just have a permissions part in the JSON code. So you say that, okay, I want to access contacts, and you describe what you want to do with contacts. And you also declare what kind of access. So in this case, you have a read-create access. It could be read-only and such, for instance, or with alarms, I want to schedule a notification. And we have also with the MDN, which is the best developer resource in the world, you have everything documented. You have all the different permissions, you have everything you can do, and also example code how you can specify how you do it. So talking about these APIs, these are a number of the regular APIs, which means that all of these APIs, you can access them from web content, from hosted apps, anything. And a number of them that I think are interesting. One is the battery status API, and this is already standardized. It's in Chrome as well. And it's basically about finding out the battery level on your device right now. So you have a few properties, like battery level. You have a Boolean, whether it's charging or not, it's connected to the charger. And you also have charging time and discharging time, which basically means how long time it's going to take until my device is fully charged or fully discharged. And a number of events to track that as well. We have the screen orientation API, and with screen orientation, basically means, for instance, let's say you're building a game, then you can lock the orientation within your app. So when the app starts, you can say that, no, I only want my app to run in portrait, no matter how much you rotate your device, or only landscape, or something like that. But you also have a few other different values. You can say landscape primary, which means that no matter how you're holding the device right now, it's going to go into landscape. But then if you keep on turning it, then it'll adapt to how you're holding it. We have the vibration API. It used to be called the vibrator API, but since people were giggling for 10 minutes every time we were talking about it, it didn't really work. So now it's the vibration API, and it's not funny at all. And with the vibration API, it's basically how can you make a device vibrate? And you have a vibrate method, and you pass in the number of milliseconds. So the first one is going to vibrate for 1 second. The second one is kind of interesting because then you have an array. You can pass in a pattern, so, which means that it's going to vibrate for 200 milliseconds, and then it's going to be still for 100 milliseconds. Then it's going to vibrate for 200 again, and be still, etc. So you can make all kinds of interesting experience. And I think we've also seen some interesting apps like navigation apps. So if you're riding your bike somewhere and you have your phone in your pocket, you can still have the navigation. And for instance, it's going to vibrate once if you're going to turn left, or twice if you need to turn right, stuff like that. And for me, especially as a web developer, where it becomes more interesting is when you get more access to the real world. That we can render lots of things on the actual screen, but for instance, with device proximity, it means if I have my phone and I move it around, I can detect how close it is to something else. And actually, people are building Highlander apps and stuff like that, and people are having sword fights. But it's quite easy to hook into. You have a device proximity event, and we also have it, you get back the value in centimeters, event.value. But you also have a couple of properties like max and min. And basically what that implies is that for this specific device with this sensor, what's the maximum distance it can detect? And what's the minimum distance it can detect? And right now, and I need to be honest about this, I thought this was really, really exciting. And then it turned out on most devices that the maximum distance was 10 centimeters and the minimum was 0. So it was, So it's not that much fun right now, at least not for me. But I think it also depends on the sensors and the phones. And I really hope it's going to be much more than that. And also, and Sina was mentioning that about ambient light. And it's about how can you adapt the experience to the current light conditions. I know it's all nice and dark out there, but it's blinding here with the spotlights. So if I were using my phone here, how can I adapt my app and the content based on this lighting? So you have a device light event, and with the device light event, you can bet something in the lux value, which basically just means, is it really bright? Is it dim in here? And then you can, for instance, you can adapt the CSS code to have a different contrast or something like that. And then you can combine it with the battery API, so you can also see that, well, the battery is low and it's low lighting, etc. What should I prioritize? And sorry. I should also say that here, and not many people have been working with lux, basically you give us a really weird value. And what you need to know is it's below 50 and around 30, I think. It's really, really dark. When you reach about 10,000, it's really, really bright. That's all you need to know. And with privileged APIs, there are a number of them right now. And with the certified APIs, we try and make more and more privileged. But you have device storage, you have browser API if you want to build a browser, TCP socket API, context API, and we also have system XHR, which is basically how can you do cross-domain requests without using cores or something like that. So if you use this API, you can do an AJAX request to any website and it's just going to work. No security problems, no access control or something like that. So with device storage, it's about detecting things on the device. How can I work with the existing files? So you have a navigator get device storage and a number of predefined paths, for instance, the videos folder. So you could get the videos folder, and then you set a cursor for that. And with that cursor, you can just enumerate through all those files within that folder. And you have, with most APIs, you have error events and you have success events. And in this case, you get a cursor result, and then you work with the file API in HTML5. And with the file, you can read out the type and size and similar, so you can make sure that, okay, it actually is a video file. It's not just some other weird file that ended up in this directory. And it doesn't just check the extension, it checks the actual MIME type of the file. But you can also test the video. So on the fly, you create a test player and see, well, it claims to be a video, but does it actually play as a video as well? One thing which I think is really interesting is web activities. I love this picture, by the way. It's from Canada, a coloring book for kids. So you have just white crayons to paint polar bears on white papers. It's from the zoo in Toronto, I think. Web activities, if you've been working with Android, they're like intents on Android, which means that from the web layer, you can declare what kind of things you want to do. So you might not have the security clearance to access a certain API, but to use an activity, you declare what kind of things you want to do, and then you can work through an activity to do that. So for instance, right now, we don't have an exposed camera API in Firefox OS. We have code, I would say, that we're using in the camera app, but it's not clean enough or ready enough to be an exposed API. And we want to add lots of more things like white balance and aperture, etc. So with Firefox OS at this moment, if you want to take a picture, you can use a web activity. So you can call an activity called pick, for instance, and then you get a menu from the operating system with all the different apps supporting that specific activity. So with the pick activity for a certain image file, it says that, well, you can get images from the wallpaper app, you can get them from the gallery app, or you can go into the camera and take pictures right away. And the way you do that is that you create a MOS activity. You have the name, which is the type of activity. And then you also have the data. And data is more about filtering what kind of apps you get back. So in this case, you would only get the apps that actually support PNG files. And as I was saying before, we have success and event handlers, success and error event handlers. And if you built an app, for instance, where you know that your app is going to support a certain activity, let's say you're building a Twitter app. So you can say, okay, within activities, within my manifest file describing my app, I support a share activity, but I only support it for image files. And when my app is being called, I want you to show sharing.html. And the last one is kind of interesting, disposition, which basically means that, okay, let's say my app is being called as a sharing app. With disposition, I could either say window or inline. And window means leave the current app and go into my app. But with inline, you're going to stay in context. You can just open up a small thing, but still stay where the user is right now. And from your app, when someone's calling your app with the share activity, you have an activity event handler. And let's say you're the wallpaper app, you can get an image, you can return that URL, and then you can post back the result or an error you want to the requesting app. And another thing that I think is also important to cover when you talk about something like, well, all of this is interesting, okay, but it's also to talk about the future. What are we working on? What didn't make it into the first release? What are we going to have in upcoming releases? Because as a developer, I think you really need to know where things are going. Like, you know, I can't do what I want right now, but can I do it 2 months later? Yeah, maybe. And I think it's good to know. We need to know more about the future, or what people are actually planning. And a number of the future APIs are, for instance, resource locking. We have peer-to-peer and WebRTC, which is really, really interesting. And it's on its way, I would say. You have an NFC API, so you can access that. You have Web USB. If you connect some things through a USB cable, you can see what's being connected. Calendar, etc. And for me personally, and I like to try different mobile operating system and see what I like. So, you know, at times I carry an iPhone, at times I carry an Android phone, just to see what I like and what I really don't like. And for me, I think where Android is way, way better than iOS is the ability to plug any keyboard into it. Like if you have an Android phone, you've been trying the Swift key or swipe keyboard or something like that, that makes the experience much, much better. And we're going to have a keyboard API as well that's sort of more or less implemented already, but it's not shipped, where you can do that as well. You can build a better keyboard or a keyboard with a certain need or something like that. And if you get a device right now, we have a number of web apps that's being shipped from Mozilla. The normal apps you would expect on a phone, like SMS, email, calendar, calling, surprisingly. And we also have the Firefox web browser. And it, in essence, it's a browser in a browser, so it's kind of Inception, but just go with it. And here's a list of the number of apps we have right now, which is basically dialing, video playing, system updating, notifications, and such. And a good thing about being Mozilla is that from day one, all the work that we've been doing on Firefox OS has been in the open. So you can follow the progress, whatever minute you want. So with Gaia, for instance, which is the user interface in Firefox OS, all the code is on GitHub, and for the operating system itself as well. So if you're building an app and you want to say, okay, how did he actually do that? Just go here. All the code is here. So you can copy an app, or you can be inspired by an app, or you might have a much better implementation than what we have, and you can just do a pull request. You can fix things, and we can work together. I think we have a good number of hundreds of people that are already contributed and made things better in Gaia, just for us by exposing it this way. And getting started with Firefox OS, right now we have something called the Firefox OS simulator. And the simulator is an extension that you install in Firefox. So when you got that installed, you get a dashboard where you can install any number of apps, so you can point to a local directory and run that directory as an app if you want to. You get error console and logging and such. I also put together a little boilerplate app, which is basically an app that doesn't do much, but it's a number of different buttons with web activities, with different web APIs, just to have really small snippets of code that you can break out. I mean, you're not going to need all of this, but if you want to use one of them, it's like, yes, that's what I wanted. So it's just a good app to show you how you build things and how you interact with things in the operating system. And talking before, we also have a Firefox marketplace. So for exposure, or if you want to have a paid app, and we also support in-app payments, you can have things in the marketplace. And to go together with that, we have something called the Developer Hub, where we try and collect all the information we have about both building and designing apps, but also about publishing apps as well. And at the end of it all, I think what I'm interested in is people trying things out. I've had this in my slides for a little while, but some time ago, my daughter had her birthday party. She was turning 8, I think. And we gave them this small letter cookies. Like each letter, or each cookie is a letter. Like this cookie is the letter B, this cookie is the letter F, etc. So we thought, well, they know how to spell right now. What happens if we give them these cookies? What's going to happen? This happened. That was the first word that was spelled, which is somewhat terrifying, right? You get this shining red rum moment, and you know you really need to talk to this young girl's parents. But at the same time, it was fun because it was, unexpected, and that's what I like. And that's what I like with exposing source code and all that. Someone's going to hack it. Someone's going to make it better. Someone's going to break it. But all that is good. Like it's a bit naive to think that, oh, I'm the best developer in the world. I can do this. I'm not going to share anything. It doesn't really work. Wow, thank you. And of course, what I really, really like is people breaking stuff. I didn't really have a good point, but I gotta have this in here. So for me, and what I really wish that you want to do as well, is just look at this. Don't build things only for Firefox OS. Build things for the mobile web. Use open web technologies. Try to ship your things to as many platforms as possible. with Firefox OS, I wanted to play around with it, see what works, see what doesn't work. I like when things are being broken, when people find some flaws in the code, when people make things better. That's how I truly believe that we can make the web and the world better by collaborating. So, thank you. Go and have some fun now. Preguntas?
Hello?
I have no idea where to look. Oh.
Hi, thank you very much for your contribution to the open web. I would like to know if in the plans of launching the Firefox OS together with Telefonica, if you're planning as well to make specially priced data plans and also work on the service side to make it really affordable, not only on your hardware side.
That's a really good question. I think I should also mention that we work with Telefonica, but we also work with, 4 other operators and a number of hardware providers. So when it comes to the business deals, it depends on the operator. So I don't know the inner specifics of what we might do with Telefonica over time as an offering. I think probably with the special pricing, like their focus, of course, is end users. And our focus is to offer the platform to as many as possible. So with server-side options or services, I think that's really interesting, and it is something that we're discussing within our developer group. Like, how can we make sure to offer people services to build richer things? We've been discussing local data. Is there any good way for us to offer local data to developers that are open, so they don't have to buy them? Like, can we offer weather, traffic, sports data that you can just hook into and have in your app? So we're discussing all of that, but pricing-wise, I don't know. There also is, I should mention, I'm just trying to figure out where they actually ship right now, but one of the phone manufacturers, CTE, have a Firefox OS phone, CTE Open, which you can buy unlocked from eBay. So it's not like, I bought this in Spain and smuggled it in my pocket. And so it's an actual store. But I think you can only buy it in the US and the UK right now, but the plan is to ship it everywhere. So that could also be an option to get just a developer phone that's not tied to a contract or something like that.
Olá.
Olá.
Eu vou fazer a pergunta em português, se é possível, estão lhe traduzindo? Meu inglês é engraçado, então vou fazer em português.
This is going to be really good.
Olá. Ok. Vou fazer 2 perguntas rápidas. Primeiro, parabéns pelo projeto Mozilla. Eu tenho acompanhado desde o início. E estás entendendo?
Yeah, you followed it since the beginning.
Ok. A gente está fazendo alguns testes na empresa e são 2 perguntas rápidas assim. Vocês recomendam alguma metodologia de JavaScript, já que são aplicações quase 100% JavaScript? Eu tenho usado Backbone e Require.js e tenho gostado bastante, tem funcionado nos simuladores, né? E a segunda pergunta, eu não sei se eu não vi, né, mas eu tenho pensado em algumas coisas. Há um projeto de API para áudio, para digitalização, para pegar frequência, entre outras coisas, de sinais de som.
Okay. So if I got that correctly, I was like talking to the tower at the airport or something. Well, but so using require.js and you building 100% JavaScript driven apps and such, I think an interesting thing to think about there is, and when you try things out, is in the simulator on a desktop, you're going to get the desktop performance, whereas the phones are much, much weaker hardware-wise. So that is an interesting challenge as a developer. Like I think the technologies, JavaScript in itself, can offer enough features, but it's also about how you approach that. Like how do you think with performance in mind? Because usually on a good desktop or an iPhone or something that has really good hardware, you don't really run into performance problems unless you do something really bad. Whereas on the Firefox OS devices we have right now, you need to be aware of that from day one. And we have, and with Mozilla Hacks, we also have an article, speaking Swedish here now, we have an article about how you can optimize, for instance, games and such that are much more performance heavy for Firefox OS. Not necessarily Firefox OS itself, but just weaker devices. So that might help with that. Before the next question, did that answer it? Good. You're saying yes because you don't want to do the translate thing again. And I appreciate it. And the second question about with working with audio and collecting audio and all that. We've been starting to implement the Web Audio API in Firefox. Chrome has implemented it. We're having it in nightly, actually later builds of Firefox as well. So right now, the version of Gecko in Firefox OS is a couple of versions behind the one being released on desktop. So Web Audio API in itself and everything you can do with Web Audio API is coming to Firefox OS as well in a matter of time. And same with WebRTC, like not only capturing audio and doing visualization and such, but also how can you record that audio, for instance, or build a new Siri or something. I don't know why you would do that, but so basically, how can you also collect someone speaking into the phone or recording audio on a device and such. So all of those things are sort of on its way, but it's not in place right now. Yes? Thank you.
Here.
Thank you.
The question is, things like most activities will be enabled running on other OSs like Android and iPhone. Which barriers will you push? Like, I'll be able to do the same stuff you said. You'll be able running Firefox OS natively on my Android, running the Firefox OS as an app.
Okay. So web activities, Google were working on something called Web Intents for a long time, a couple of years. And then they sort of canceled that work. And without getting into the politics of that, we talk with them all the time on different things, and we try and collaborate on as much as possible. So I believe that Web Intents, or whatever it's going to be called, and web activities are going to be meshed into something together over time. So I believe it will happen on Android, and I'd love to see something like that on iOS as well, like from a web app to be able to say that, okay, my web app wants to go into the camera. You don't need to have the Objective-C code and the phone gap wrapper just to access the camera. But with Apple, no one knows, right? You'll know when they ship it. But with Android, for instance, I'm sure it's going to happen over time, and it'll be interesting to see. Also with Chrome OS, because they're doing Chrome OS, which is kind of a web-driven thing for notebooks, and we're doing this for phones and tablets. And one day, things are going to start overlapping. So we're sort of having our own things that we're working on right now, but we try and collaborate more and more. So I think, to answer the question, I think web activities or something similar will be available on Android as well. Like I don't want all of this stuff to be only on Firefox OS. I want as many as possible to implement that. So then when it comes to breaking barriers, right now there are a number of devices that support Firefox OS, the ones that are being sold. And the interesting part is that when we started out with Firefox OS, the first phone we did it on was a Galaxy S2. So basically you had a Galaxy S2 with Android on it, and then you plugged it in, and then you threw everything out just to get the drivers, which are, as always, proprietary. So we can't expose them to everyone. And then we just overrode it with Firefox OS. So there are some interesting blog posts and articles and the XDA forums and such, where if you have an old Android phone, you can hack it and run Firefox OS. When we launched, not before we launched it, when we just spoke about Firefox OS and had the first code, someone put it on Raspberry Pi. So it's not things that we support, but we're not against. And me personally, I love when people hack existing stuff. But the only thing is that it won't, from what I believe, be able to run on top of something else. You might be able to take a device and replace it with Firefox OS, but I don't think you can run it side by side. I know some people are dual booting Android and Firefox OS on some phones, but I wouldn't recommend it. Like, it could work, but it's a world of pain.
Just one more question. I was talking with the guys on the Mozilla stand, and we were talking about some application I've installed on my OS X, on my MacBook, and I've tried it also on the Firefox OS simulator, and it impressed me because I was able to run the same app on both, and when I was running it on my OS X, the icon, it was SoundCloud. The icon, I was able to look up for it on my Spotlight and use it as almost a native app on my OS X. So what I want to know is if it will be able to do the same thing on Android. Like I will install the SoundCloud on top of my Firefox, and an icon such as a native app will appear on my menu.
Right now, with Open Web Apps, you can install them on an Android phone. So for instance, on my Android phone, I have the Boilerplate app installed. So you get the icon, and you start it up, and you got the splash screen and all that. But then, of course, with APIs, you don't have all the API support. But it's still being run within. So if you have Firefox, it's still going to run in there. So you can do that right now. It's just different access to more things on Android that you can't do. But you can install things as an app right now in Android. And personally, I want these apps to be able to be installed anywhere, right? I don't want to be only our devices. I want the web to be everywhere. Oh, with the marketplace, how much we're going to take? I think, if I remember correctly, and I might just be making shit up right now, but I think it's about the normal thing, 30% something, that's being taken to sort of cover the costs for running the marketplace. And I can look that up, but I think it's just to be in line with the others.
You've told in the beginning of your speech that you were not trying to compete with other players. There are some features that you see there are not going to be present in Firefox OS.
So
some features in Android, and iOS that we are not going to put it. It's not our focus. It's I don't know.
Right. So I would say, and I'm going to sound like a salesman now, so forgive me. But I'm going to say, and the idea with this is rather that hopefully we can move faster with the web APIs and offer more features than you have on the other platforms. Because every feature is so isolated. Like, let's say iOS, for instance, they update it, once per year or something with the next version of iOS, and that's it. And then you have security updates and all that. Whereas if we have a new API that's really good and we can get it standardized, we can ship it way faster. So I think, well, A, we can do more things, and B, there are no features that I know that we can't do. I think it's more about, right now, it could be, for instance, hardware. like the hardware on an iPhone and an Nexus 4 is much better than the Firefox OS phones for cost reasons. So there they have, probably better, depending what you do, a better game performance or frames per second and such. But over time, and I should also say that even if we have the emerging markets, we have the cheap phones right now, there will be more expensive phones. For instance, one of the hardware providers are LG, and LG don't do cheap phones. They're going to do a more high-end phone. Yes? No? Okay. Obrigado.